Do I have a great story to share with you? A story from across the pond in England. It was just after New Year's Day in 2010, and a 29-year-old British builder was working on a builder site west of London, and he jumped from one of the beams, hoping to land safely, another spot in the building site. And as he jumped off, he noticed that down below, on the spot he's going to land, there's a huge nail sticking up from one of the boards there. And he knows it's too late to do anything about it, and he's coming down, and he's watching that huge nail come closer and closer as time seems to stand still. He lands on it, the nail goes clean through his boot, and he collapses in pain. His co-workers come to him, and they're about to take off the boot. He says, "Don't touch the boot. I'm in such pain. I don't want you to do anything. Please don't even move it. Just call an ambulance. Get me to a hospital." They bring him to the emergency room in the London hospital, and immediately they give him some painkiller to try to deaden the pain so they can take off the boot. And even after the painkiller is administered, he says, "Don't touch it. I'm in tremendous pain. I don't want you to move it." So finally they have to give him fentanyl, which is a painkiller like 100 times stronger than morphine. And finally, the pain is out, and he's out, and the doctors are ready to take off the boot. And they're imagining what kind of horrible damage they're going to find to his poor foot that the nail went straight through. They take off the boot, and lo and behold, the nail had gone clean between the worker's toes. There was no damage at all. Now, it seems amazing. So what was he in pain about? He was in pain because he expected to feel pain. And expectations can become reality. And this is the fascinating idea I would like to explore with you, because this is something that can become very useful in our own lives and the lives of people around us, to understand how with expectations one can grow and turn it into reality. Let's look at the season that we're in the Jewish calendar. It's the 3 weeks, and on the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av, we read in Parshas Devarim that Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jewish nation its history, a history that's about 40 years old, and he reminds them of the time that it was time to leave Har Sinai, where they had received the Torah. The Sefer Devarim and Parshas Devarim opens up, and it tells us, Hashem Elokeinu dibir aleinu b'chorev le'emor, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke to us at Har Sinai, and he said, Rav lachem sheves ba'arazeh. It's enough. You spent enough time at Har Sinai. What's next? Penu u'su'u lachem. Turn yourself around and travel. Lachem. For you or to you. You're traveling to something even greater than Har Sinai. What could there be greater than Har Sinai? So Rav Moshe Alshich, the famed Makubal Darshan from Tzfas, explains in Alshich al HaTorah. Du'u lachem, you should know, ki gedoyle mizu tiyeh lachem ba'aretz, that something even greater than Har Sinai awaits you in Eretz Yisrael. What are we missing at Har Sinai? Ki atem rechaykim mishorasheichem. Because even at Har Sinai, you're distant from the root of your soul. And now, turn and travel towards Eretz Yisrael, because that's where the shoresh, the root soul of every Jew, is, in the land of Israel. And therefore it's Penu Usu'u Lachem. Travel Lachem to yourselves. Find yourselves. Because in Eretz Yisrael is where you're going to find yourself. Similarly, in the beginning of Chumash, Avraham Avinu was told, Lech Lecha. Travel to yourself, because Hashem is revealing the secret that until he's in Eretz Yisrael, he hasn't found the root of his soul. In diaspora, in Golus, if we feel a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit unsettled, that's normal, because it means that we have a sensitivity to the fact that our soul is not completely at rest because we are in Golus. And the question becomes, what is the ticket in our generation to get this invitation from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Penu Usu'u Lachem? It's time to travel to your soul root. How do we get back to Eretz Yisrael? what can we do in our own little ways to bring the Geula? So, like every case where something goes wrong, one has to diagnose where it started from. Let's look at the history of the Churban Bayis Sheni, the time the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. The underlying cause, the Gemara in Yuma Daf Tes tells us, was sinas chinam, ungrounded hatred. The immediate cause was the event of Kamsa Bar Kamsa. You might know the story, that there was an unnamed host who was planning an elaborate feast, and he asked his butler to invite his good friend Kamsa. The butler unfortunately got confused, and he invited the enemy of the host, who happened to have a similar close name, Bar Kamsa. Bar Kamsa comes to the meal, and when the host walks in, he sees his enemy sitting there. He says, "What are you doing here?" To which Bar Kamsa says, "Well, I'm here already, so, let me be, and I'll pay for the setting." The host says, "Nothing doing, out." Bar Kamsa doesn't want to be embarrassed in public. So he asks to be allowed to stay, offering first that he'll pay the expense of half of this feast, finally to the entire feast. But the host is having nothing of this. The host picks him up, throws him out. Bar Kamsa is terribly embarrassed, and he decides that he's going to have his revenge in a very, very awesome manner. He's going to go to Rome, and he's going to tell the Roman emperor that the Jews are in rebellion, thus bringing the Roman legions to destroy Jerusalem. He goes to the Roman emperor and he says, "You should know the Jews are rebelling against you." The Roman emperor asks for some credible evidence. So Bar Kamsa suggests that the Roman emperor sends a korban, a sacrifice, to see if the Jews will sacrifice the animal gift sent by the Roman emperor on the Mizbeach. Now normally the Jews will accept a korban from a Gentile. So halachically it was doable. So what was Bar Kamsa's plan? His plan was that while the animal was in transit with himself returning to Eretz Yisrael, he inflicted a blemish upon the animal, thereby rendering it unfit to put on the altar. But he did this in the following cunning manner. If he had put a blemish on it, then the Jews could just explain, well, we want to sacrifice this animal sent by the Caesar, but had a blemish. So he realized that there's a difference between what Jews consider a blemish and what secular Roman society considers a blemish. So he inflicted it in one of two places. The Talmud tells us either he inflicted it on the lips or he inflicted it on the eyelids. A place where it's a blemish al pi halacha, but the Romans would never believe that such an insubstantial thing is a blemish. And thus played out the drama that brought an end to the second Beis Hamikdash. The Marsha on that piece of Talmud has a very beautiful insight into this tragic episode. And he says the fact that Bar Kamsa inflicted the blemish on the lips or the eyes was of tremendous significance. Remez lehen la'osadur was a hint to that generation. Shahayu behen bali lashon harish shumum nivsvasayim ba'adam. That the blemish in the lips pointed to the shortcomings of the Jews at that time. That their lips were blemished because of speaking lashon hara, because of speaking in a derogatory manner against other people. And the other possibility is dukan sheba'ayin, that the blemish was put into the eyelid. Shahayu behen balei tsarei ayin, because they were Jews that looked with an unforgiving, negative eye on other Jews. And those are the two character traits that are hinted at in this story that capture what the fault was of the Jewish people in that time period. And if that was the fault that brought about the destruction of Beis Hamikdash, then we have to think about how we correct that fault in order to hear God's invitation once more of Penu Usa'u Lachem, it's time to travel to Eretz Yisrael. When we think about Sarei Ayin, people who have an eye that's unforgiving to other people, so we think about the idea of finding fault with other people, not forgiving them for their successes, being jealous of them. I'm not sure that that's enough just to try to remove those negative traits. People are capable of not only cleansing themselves from that negative vision of other people, but we are capable of actually building up people with the way we look at them. During the 9 days, we think about Aaron Kohen Gadol, whose yahrzeit was Rosh Chodesh Av. He died on Rosh Chodesh Av. And his Shiva took up the first 7 days of the 9 days of Av. And Aaron Kohen Gadol might be a model of who to emulate to get back to the Beis HaMikdash. We're told that when Aaron Kohen Gadol died, he was mourned by the entire house of Israel, something even Moshe himself did not merit. Because he was an Oyev Shalom and he was a Roid of Shalom, because of Aaron's tremendous love for the Jewish people. How do you help people after you love them? Once you decide you want to help them, but how do you go about doing that? How do you help people improve? So there's a beautiful medrash that tells us that Aaron would greet people with such love and such warmth, and he would let the people know how much he thought of them, that if a person later would think of sinning, he would say to himself, how could I do this bad deed when Aaron Kohen Gadol thinks so much of me? How will I ever look him in the eye again when he greets me so beautifully? That was a tremendous power. This was Aaron Kohen Gadol's technique for influencing people to grow. And it took thousands of years for this technique to be understood by secular thinkers such as Dale Carnegie, who writes that we should all give our friends a grand reputation to live up to. This was one of the secrets that Aaron Kohen Gadol used thousands of years before Dale Carnegie. And this is something we could use ourselves. Because if we want to cure ourselves of tsarei ayin, of people who look down or look negatively on other human beings, it might not be enough to go from minus to neutral. Let's try to go to positive, which means that when we look at people, we want to see the best in them and think about how much more that they're capable of, and then express with our lips that thought that, you're a great person and you could be even greater. And if we do that, we might be a step closer to hearing Hashem's invitation of Penu U'Sa'u Lachem. I'll give you another example from the secular world. It's a story about a teacher. Teacher comes in to the beginning of the season, beginning of the school term, and the principal gives this teacher a list of students, and next to the students there are numbers. This student 138, this student 140, this student 141. And the teacher looks at the list and those numbers, says, wow, look how high their IQ numbers are. This must be a real honors class that they're giving. What a privilege. So the teacher puts herself out to be as creative as possible, and after all, she's dealing with honors class. And after a few months, the principal comes to the teacher and says, you've done really a tremendous job with the class. Their academic level is excellent. To which the teacher said, well, why are you surprised? You gave me an honors class. The principal says, an honors class? Why do you think they're an honors class? Says, the list you gave me, the names, all those high numbers. I saw 130, I saw 141 and 145. Those are very high IQ scores. To which the principal smiles and says, those were the numbers of their lacquers, not the IQ score. But as long as the teacher thought they were high IQ scores, the teacher taught in that manner, had expectations, and the children lived up to the expectations. That's what expectations can do. It's interesting that this message comes to us from Aaron Kohen Gadol. Because when you think about it, a Kohen Gadol is a very spiritual person. He lives in the rarefied atmosphere of the Beis HaMikdash, of the Holy Temple, the one individual that can go into the Kodesh Kadashim, the most sanctified place. You would think that such a spiritual person would look down at normal people and their pursuits as mere plebeians compared to the atmosphere that he is normally operating in. And yet Aaron Kohen Gadol, with all of his holiness, he was the person who saw value in every single Jew. On the surface, it appears to be a contradiction, an oxymoron. But you know what? I think the question is actually the answer. Aaron Kohen Gadol worked in the Beis HaMikdash, and achieved a tremendous closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because he was so close to Hashem, because he was in such a firm atmosphere, he understood the value of every single Jew, because he saw every single Jew as a son of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He saw the spiritual potential in every human being because they were all God's children. And that's why Aaron Kohen Gadol, the one who hangs out in the Kodesh Kadoshim, looks at every single Jew. And he wants them to know, do you know who you are? You're a child of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You have a neshama that God gave you. And therefore it's not a contradiction. It goes very beautifully together. The Beis Hamikdash is a place to connect with God. And the more connected we are with God, the more connected we are to the beauty and the potential of every person around us. And once we understand that, we can understand the reason why the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of ungrounded hatred. Because if you have a Beis Hamikdash and you're not in love with other Jews, then the Beis Hamikdash hasn't changed you. You didn't get the message. The Beis Hamikdash was dead already before Titus came to destroy it. Because if there's sinas chinam, then we're looking at other Jews not as the children of Hashem. So what did we learn in the Beis Hamikdash? We weren't using it. It was dead. So God said, it's dead anyway. Let Titus come and burn it. The firmer we are, the more connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we have to see in other people their greatness and the potential for even greater deeds. And if we do that, if we greet people with the feeling that, wow, you're special, and you're even capable of doing more good than you have before, every human being feels valued, every human being feels appreciated, and every human being feels, I'm motivated to do better. Could you imagine what a wonderful world we could create if we took the message of Aaron Kohen Gadol and we tried to incorporate it in our lives? We would be happier, the people around us would be happier, they'd feel appreciated, they would be growing, and we could get one step closer to building the model society of Ahavas Chidot. And that society will be the society that comes on the wings of eagles. And Hashem extends to us the invitation of Penu U'Sa'u Lachem. Come back to the land of Israel, where your soul belongs. Thank you for your kind attention.